Hey everyone, I'm Drew Buchanan, otherwise known as Chiron the Mage, and I won the CCS Houston 5K with Detonate Draven. So here's the list, courtesy of riftdex.com, and we'll do just a brief little card by card and just an overall game plan of the deck, and then just do a informal just walkthrough of my rounds through the entirety of the CCS weekend, both their 25K on Saturday and their 5K on Sunday. But first, this video is sponsored by FlexSlot.gg. I've been using FlexSlot for years for creating deck lists, sideboard guides, and social media deck graphics for Magic decks, and now they're entering the Riftbound space. Having a physical sideboard map with you relieves a lot of mental bandwidth, letting you focus on conquering battlefields instead of your sideboard configuration, and there's no better website to help you make one. FlexSlot.gg for the grindy matchups. So before we dive in, I also just want to give a shout out to Team Detonate for their Detonate Draven deck guide on metafy.gg. And I'll have a link to this in the description, but this is where I learned the important parts of this deck, namely how to perform the loops that the deck is so widely reviled for, and also where my sideboard configurations came from, or at the very least where they started. I made a couple deviations from here, but definitely a very, very good starting point. So here's the list, and you'll notice I made no changes from the Metafy deck guide. I think the deck is almost literally perfectly constructed for the current metagame, and I don't believe there are any changes that would make this deck better. The key aspects of this deck are you're using Treasure Trove and Detonate as a engine that is power neutral to cycle through your whole deck, and when paired with the core engine of Ezreal, Seal of Discord, Scrap Heap, and Call Shot, just turbo through your entire deck in a matter of 1, maybe 2 turns, and then use all of the spells that you cast to power out 1-cost Battering Rams and 0-cost Rasas. And this deck chooses to use 2 copies of Bushwhack, which I think is very, very good in the current metagame. It allows you to play through a Defy particularly easily. It allows you to have back-to-back large crash turns. And also it gives you extra hidden cards, which helps obfuscate your fight or flights a little bit. Obviously, hiding Bushwhack does carry risks, but if you hide a Bushwhack on a battlefield that has 30 might on it, it's much, much less of a risk. And the floor is you converted a seal that you weren't using the power from into a gold for your following turn. So as long as you have access to one of the copies, hiding a copy of Bushwhack is not the end of the world. This deck also has a near unbeatable grind game, both with having a copy of Last Rites and a copy of Vi. Between these 2 cards, you're able to both, one, just ensure you have a constant stream of creatures, units, just coming through constantly, as well as just be able to stack your deck and with the Vi and ensure that you have interaction so that your board does not get broken. The deck guide in the Metafy does a much better job of explaining how the loop works, but just as a brief overview, you would build a pile that is 1 Scrap Heap, all 3 Call Shots, 1 copy of Detonate, and then you'll have 5 or 6 cards that you want to get access to in the pile as well. And you'll stack it so that it is Scrap Heap, Called Shot, card you want, Called Shot, card you want, detonate, and then the rest of the cards that you want. You play the scrap heap, draw into the first called shot. The called shot draws the other two called shots. Then the next, you play the other two called shots, ensure you get the detonate in your hand, and then by then your deck will have 3 cards left in it. Detonating the scrap heap gets the rest of the cards into your hand. This just allows you to have an infinite stream of rebukes, fireflights, big dudes, just whatever you need to actually finish the game. Overall, this deck is trying to be the bigger, more consistent, but a little bit slower Miracle variant. And what this ends up doing is, one, you will be playing against the clock in a lot of matchups, especially if people are taking their time trying to figure out how to break your board. So in physical play, anything you can do to make your opponent's life easier, namely, just tell them, okay, I currently have X number of might represented at this battlefield. I would even go so far as to say my Draven Vanquisher represents +2, so I can just say it is currently on board a maximum of X, and I would just include the Draven trigger, just so that people are more easily able to be like, okay, so if it's this, there's 1 to 2 spinning axes I'm afraid of, there's a rebuke. Just make your opponent's life easier, help them help you finish a match in time. The deck guide goes into this as well. They have 2 bullet points even, stating that the clock is your biggest enemy, and the clock is your biggest enemy. And this is extremely true, as we'll get into in the round by round. So round 1 of the 5K, I'm playing against Ezreal Prodigal Explorer, and this matchup gets covered pretty in-depth in the Metafy guide. What this ends up coming down to is you will be just trading resources with the Ezreal player, but eventually they will run out of stuff, and your deck, as long as you're able to protect your Vi and or your shovel, just ensure you constantly have access to one of those two, you actually cannot lose the game unless you get aggroed out. The core of the matchup comes down to, okay, there's this singularity which trades for two of your big dudes, which is fine. You're very, very energy positive in that exchange. They'll be drawing a card from it, but if your engine is running, them drawing 1 card doesn't matter because we've drawn 10. So it's just a matter of throwing enough might at them over and over and over again so that they can't actually win the game. In my match against Ezreal, this match very much went to time. These decks are 2 very, very dirtily decks. It will take you the full 60 minutes to play 3 games. So you need to ensure that you are able to perform the actions required of this deck very quickly. I end up winning the first game where I bring Zon Warrens and they bring Voidgate. Voidgate is largely a blank battlefield here because the extra damage doesn't really do much of anything. When they're casting a Singularity, it doesn't actually change any key breakpoints, and Wages of Pain also doesn't change any key breakpoints. Everything that would die to Wages of Pain, except your Draven, will still die to Wages of Pain, and everything that would die to a Singularity still dies to a Singularity. So it doesn't actually meaningfully change any of the breakpoints, which is nice. It's just a blank battlefield. It's just there for points, and we're mostly going to be fighting over Zon Warrens for the card selection. And so I end up just running through my deck and just end up going through the motions quite a few times of just like, okay, here's my whole deck. I'm going through my whole deck. Here's 28 might of dudes, and break this or you die. I did end up in the first game having just a small sequencing error where I did not put cards into my deck with Vi, and ended up overdrawing by moving a merchant into a Zon Warrens, and or no, I moved a Ezreal into a Zon Warrens, killed a Ravenbloom student, and then pitched a scrap heap. And my opponent said, "You have a Draven trigger," when I had 2 cards in my deck. So I ended up drawing 3 cards, shuffle my whole graveyard into my deck, and end up having to basically miracle again, which is terrible for the clock. I end up winning that game, but it was very much dicier than it should have been. I end up losing game 2. Don't really remember what happened. I think it was just a double Ravenbloom student draw that I couldn't really answer particularly effectively. Between just, it was a lot of singularities as well. Something that will be a common theme throughout all this is that I don't have particularly good notes, because I can't really take good notes while staring down the clock. But something we'll just have to live with and just do what we can. I ended up managing to win game 3 as well. Game 3, I managed to establish the famed Pack of Wonders treasure trove interaction, where you play a treasure trove, you play a Pack of Wonders, you pick up the treasure trove, you channel and draw without having to spend a power. It ends up building up your resources in a way that's not vulnerable to pickpocket, and also is just extremely tempo negative if they happen to try to rocket barrage your engine to try to break it up. And with the Pack of Wonders treasure trove engine, I'm able to just grind my opponent into the dust. And there's a bunch of different tricks you can do with Pack of Wonders. You're able to reset hidden cards if you need to. You're able to also pick up units, which was really relevant in this 3rd game. I had a battering ram in play. I sent it into a battlefield, conquered with it, and then deployed 2 Ferris Forerunners and used the Pack of Wonders to pick up the battering ram, and it just gave my opponent no good singularity targets. I'm just actively begging my opponent, please cast a singularity, just spend 6 mana doing nothing and just break up my Ferris Forerunner. Another thing I managed to do with the Pack of Wonders in this game was my opponent had used their Mind Splitter and both of their Arcane Shifts, so I was able to play the Vi and put some stuff back into my deck, and then use the Pack of Wonders to pick up the Vi to protect the Vi from a removal spell. In short, try and use every bit of the buffalo when you're playing this game, when you're playing this deck. Every single little interaction adds up, and if you're able to do this all quickly, you'll see a lot of success. Round 2 of this tournament, I end up playing against mid-range Master Yi, and this deck list was certainly something else. In game 1, I end up managing to only score 2 points and got my back annihilated by a Janna. I sent in the Draven and used a Fight or Flight in the showdown to try and get both the card draw and the treasure, because I just needed I needed more resources, I felt like. My draw didn't line up in game 1. I skipped turn 1, no treasure trove, no scrap heap, no traveling merchant, just skipped turn 1. And by sending the Draven and using the Fight or Flight in the showdown to try to accrue resources, I got my back annihilated by this Janna. They let the Fight or Flight resolve and then sent in a Janna, pushed my Draven out, and then it ended up scoring them a point, which, now that I'm thinking about it, does not work. Maybe I should have called the judge on that, but just even if they don't score that point, I'm still just like getting my back broken by this green Poro with a Triforce on it that I can't actually break. This thing has like it's like 7 might, just unkillable. Needed multiple dudes to try and break it. Wasn't in the cards. Managed to win game 2 by throwing 30 might into a Ruin Runner that had a Triforce on it, and then managed to just stop my opponent from having creatures in play. And then game 3, it was the double obelisk game. My opponent was on the play and managed to just have creature, and untapped into a Triforce with not so fast backup, and I just couldn't actually break into the battlefields at all. So 1-1 at this point, and just very rough starts. Just not how you want to start a tournament, really. Round 3, I paired into a Lux, and Lux, not using the yellow Lux, but using the blue Lux. Not really a whole lot to say about this. Largely treated it like a hybrid of Ezreal and Victor, but I had a lot more time to set up the Trove pack engine, and also had plenty of time to establish Ferris Forerunner. So I'm able to just grind through everything they had. An important note here in this matchup, and all yellow matchups really that play tokens, Imperial Decree is not Death Touch. It actually works like Stinkweed Imp from Magic, where instead of it just killing the creature as part of combat, it creates a trigger when it deals damage. What this means is if you send in a unit with an Imperial Decree, the Draven player's unit will be left at the battlefield alone with the Imperial Decree trigger on the stack, which means that the Draven player will draw despite it losing the combat. Kind of nonsense that it works this way, but just my Imperial Decree costing my opponent 2 of their tokens and giving me 2 cards, kinda a tough sell. Round 4 of this tournament, I get my first mid-range Draven matchup of the weekend, and not really a whole lot to say about this. Mid-range Draven is not trying to commit the same number of game actions you are, so they will typically end up being the aggressor. They have more 2-drops, they have a lot more mid-range threats in the form of Darius and Kaisa, and those will typically translate into an early lead for them. And so you'll have to accept the fact that you will be down some number of points, and you'll have to grind your way through. You'll typically end up having to use multiple fight or flights in order to stabilize early as well. At one point in this match, I am down 7-0, but still manage to just grind all the way through, and just end up winning 8-7, recovering from a 7-0 deficit. This deck is extremely powerful given infinite time. Utilize your tools to get that time. Round 5, I pair into a Kaisa, and the way this matchup plays out, you will typically end up just losing all of your dudes. Eventually, the Kaisa deck is just all removal spells and a small handful of creatures. And what this means for you is you just have to accept everything's gonna die. The big thing there is just ensure that your Vi is not at a battlefield, so they have to spend a shot of Falling Star or Singularity in order to save it. And also just be be aware that you might have to proactively shuffle stuff back into your deck, even if you don't have a perfect Doomsday pile yet. Another key factor in this matchup is Last Rites. Last Rites is very, very important in this matchup. All you're really doing at this point is just counting the number of rectangles. You're trying to ensure that you have more dudes than they have removal spells. Round 6, I pair into an Irelia player, and despite being the roommate of one of the best Irelia players in the state, maybe even a larger sample size than that in the country, Sean Gallagher, the homie, living right upstairs, I still don't have a very firm grasp on how to tackle this matchup. There are certain ways that theoretically could help fix this matchup, but the Irelia deck lists aren't really consolidated on anything yet. Sean plays a list that doesn't have Sneaky Deckhand, which is a lot worse for me. This opponent did have Sneaky Deckhand, but it didn't really seem to matter. I also ended up losing the Obelisk subgame. Per the Metafy guide, you're supposed to lead on Obelisk, and that's something that I haven't really had success with. The goal is to try to match their Obelisk to get the Obelisk out of the way, because they utilize Obelisk a lot better than we do. The ceiling on our Obelisk is if they put us on the play, we can like seal Ezreal or something to get our engine started a little quicker. Or if we're on the draw and there's one Obelisk, or if we're on the play and there's an Obelisk, we get to deploy our Draven. But the Sneaky Deckhand builds of the deck are much better at using Obelisk than we are. If they blind game 1 Obelisk, then we are usually in a not good spot if they have Sneaky Deckhand. Like I've been saying, this deck is just trying to buy as many turns as possible. And given infinite time, we do beat most things. However, one of the things we can't beat is a Stellacorn going infinite, because they'll have enough options and enough resources that they will be able to either stop us from breaking their board with our creatures, or they will be able to break our 30 might board very easily with a 32 might Irelia. Something that I would have to figure out is just how much Falling Star actually matters in the matchup. In order to kill an Irelia with it, you have to recycle 4, and you just end up putting yourself directly into the Shadow Realm when you do it. You're usually supposed to do it, but the Falling Stars are also just horrible against Zanya's Hourglass. The change to it not being reflexive triggers anymore means that you can't use the first charge to pop a Zanya's and then kill a Stellacorn herder with the second charge. So I'm not sure how useful that is in the matchup anymore. I'm uncertain how useful Ferris Forerunner is in the matchup. People are supposed to be cutting their fighter flights and rebukes from the Irelia side, which in theory makes the Forerunners a lot better. But if people aren't doing that, then the Ferris Forerunner is just a very, very back-breaking play of, I spent my entire turn developing this Ferris Forerunner, you rebuke it, and I just spent 6 mana doing nothing. Something else to figure out too is how to Obelisk, but that's just the Obelisk subgame in general, which is something I'm not particularly good at. But I end up losing this match in 2 games, and neither game was particularly close. So, at this point, dead in the tournament. Not really much I can do, but I end up playing out the remainder of day one since there was only one round left, and I still had to wait for the people in my car to finish their tournament as well. So I end up pairing into another mid-range Draven player, and this mid-range Draven player had some interesting technology in their sideboard, namely an invert timelines to try and catch miracle players unaware and potentially cheese extra points, as well as just resetting hand sizes. The invert timelines ended up not working out for my opponent because I had a bunch of cycling, but I didn't draw any rams off of my cycling. I just drew all Rossas, but couldn't actually get the Rossas down to castable, which ended up with me having like 7-8 cards in hand with like 2 or 3 Rossas, and I ended up developing a shovel instead of just like going super hard just to play around invert timelines a little bit, because my opponent was like somewhat foretelling that they did have an invert timelines. And so I just did my best to play around it by developing the shovel, and that shovel ended up putting 4 more bodies into play, and the shovel just ground through everything, including buying back an Ezreal in my begin phase when I had no cards in hand. So I just had a draw 2 off my hold trigger and then channel and then draw another card, and those 3 cards ended up just breaking my opponent's whole board on their own. So due to the tournament structure, we only played 7 rounds of the Saturday tournament on Saturday proper, and then we played the 8th and final round of Swiss on Sunday morning, after which there was the top cut to top 16. After round 7, I end up looking, and with my team and a bunch of people in a Facebook group chat, we end up running the numbers and figuring out, okay, assuming everyone above me does what they're supposed to do and the top 5 tables draw, that leaves 6 spots for the remainder of the top 16, and those next 6 tables are playing for getting into the top 16. So I end up pairing into a Kaisa player, and end up losing game 1. A pretty uneventful game 1. They presented their Reavers row, but I had a difficult time capitalizing on the Reavers row. Drew a little bit of a bricked hand, but also they ended up drawing enough removal spells that I couldn't actually get a foothold in the game. Ended up losing an Ezreal and a Traveling Merchant to the same Falling Star. Ended up losing my turn 2 Draven to a Falling Star. Just didn't really have much of anything going on in game 1. Game 2 was another shovel game. This shovel represented like 3 creatures out of my graveyard, and my opponent revealed a bunch of technology to me in this second game that enabled me to change how I wanted to sideboard, namely an unchecked power and a time warp. They showed me the unchecked power when I had a Traveling Merchant carrying both a shovel and a spinning axe, paired with a Rasa and a Battering Ram on one battlefield with a Hidden Fighter Flight, and then a Rasa and a Ram on the other battlefield, also hiding a Fighter Flight. So they just tap down to 4 runes, cast the unchecked power, I off the Merchant and a Rasa back, pitch a scrap heap, draw 2 more cards, and then end up hard bargaining a some sort of follow-up. I want to say it was like a Falling Star or something to try and like break the Rasa, but I ended up winning that game on the back of this shovel just making a bunch of extra bodies that ended up just grinding my opponent into the dust. And then game 3, a very similar scenario. I ended up boarding in the Falling Star because they showed me more smaller units than I expected. Lecturing Yordle still around, plundering Poro. So the Falling Star being able to connect with 2 things and just get a nice crisp 2-for-1 seemed very appealing. And I ended up tapping down to 2 runes with double Ezreal in play, and my opponent managed to take both battlefields and tried to time warp, and I repeated the hard bargain with double Ezreal in play, so I only had to pay 2 for the repeat, and my opponent just ended up Shadow Realmed by spending 10 mana and accomplishing nothing and I was able to punish with my large development turn the turn prior and then untap and break their board. So I end up winning this match thinking, okay, I am live for the top 16 cut, and I just have to hope that breakers end up working out. And I start to walk over to the bathroom, and they announce that, hey, we're done. We've published standings. I turn around, go and talk to Sean, and Sean just hits me with the 17th. It's a very, very painful 17th. But before I walk to the bathroom, I just go and register for the 5K to ensure that I am in, and I get my deck list submitted. I end up running back this same deck list in the 5K. No changes. Deck's very powerful. I had some options on me of like trying to swap to the Noxus Hopeful Nocturne version, but I don't think that version plays to my strengths as a player. I just want to be the bigger deck, the chunkier deck that the Detonate version enables me to play. Thanks for sticking with me. One more quick ad read, then we'll get back to the video. This video is also sponsored by Nextlog.gg. How favored is Irelia into Miracle Draven? Does leading Obelisk or Zon Warrens work better into Victor? Who are we? Where are we going in life? Nextlog.gg has the answers to all of these and more. As an easy-to-use stat tracker, Nextlog.gg led our team's data-driven approach to Set 2 and will keep you from being vexed by all the options Set 3 has in store. So after a hard-to-breaking tiebreaker sweat that didn't go my way, I end up registering for the 5K. And round 1, I pair into Victor. As a player, I've never had a particularly good Victor matchup with any of the decks I've liked to play. I played Master Yi in set 1. I played Irelia at the start of set 2, and both decks are not particularly good into Victor. Call the week, just an absolute backbreaking. However, Miracle Draven as a deck, fairly resilient to Call the Week. Obviously, it kind of sucks if you get your Draven or your Ezreal eaten if you don't have anything to tank the Call the Week for them. But besides that, you have so many raw bodies that don't particularly mean a whole bunch, and you just have to ensure that you are able to protect either your Vi or your shovel, and you will eventually run them out of real things. Important things to note again are the Imperial Decree Glorious Executioner interaction, so that you do draw cards even if the Imperial Decreed unit connects with your unit that is alone, as well as just ensure that you are able to just continually equip your shovel and put it on battlefields. An important thing to note post board is on your Veiled Temple game, you are able to, if you have the power floating around and the cards in your trash to get away with doing this, you're able to use the Veiled Temple Conquer trigger to detach your shovel, put it on something else, and then conquer the other battlefield, so that you're able to get 2 conquers and potentially a hold in a turn cycle. 3 shovel triggers in a turn cycle is very, very, very powerful, and the Victor deck will eventually just run out of raw cards that destroy your units. Very similar to Kaisa and the mid-range Draven matchups, Shovel is the MVP here. Round 2, I paired into yet another mid-range Draven opponent. Nothing really too much to discuss in this. I didn't take particularly good notes here, other than the fact that we only really played 2 games, and I managed to win both games. They ended up fairly close, neck and neck for a little bit, but besides that, just took more game actions and managed to outgrind another mid-range Draven opponent. Round 3 of this tournament, I end up pairing into Nova on Twitter, and he and I had been sitting next to each other throughout the day. We'd both been performing pretty well, and we both knew that we were both playing Miracle Draven variants. So as I sit down, he sits down just a little bit after me, and we do typical pleasantries exchange, and then I just tell him straight up, look, we're playing the Miracle Mirror. We're going to have to play very quickly if we're going to finish 3 games. We have 20 minutes to play each game. I can see the clock. I'm going to hold you to the clock, and I expect you to do the same to me. And Nova, A+ individual, took it in stride and was like, yep, absolutely, agreed. I want to finish 3 games. We do end up just playing extremely quickly. Both of us were just shortcutting fairly aggressively, just like ensuring, okay, I'm F6 at this point. Do all the shit you need to do. I'm gonna just start getting ready to make sure that we don't waste any time here. And those shortcuts that you take, imperative to actually finishing a match in time. The big issue is that both players do have multiple miracle turns that they need to play out, and it does take a fair amount of time. Only thing I can really suggest is, 1, know exactly what you're looking for in a cantrip. And if you can just have like a stack ranked list of, okay, this called shot needs to have a Seal of Discord in it, I'll take that over anything. I will settle for a scrap heap, a called shot, whatever. Know what you're looking for in your cantrips. And also, goldfish the deck as much as possible, so that way you are able to actually do the dexterity stuff required to actually finish a match in time. I end up taking game 1, my Veiled Temple representing a bunch of extra purple power off of my seals, while my opponent didn't have seals, but also ended up spinning down pretty aggressively to try to match my development. Ended up with me walking away with that game. Veiled Temple representing extra power, very, very important. Just being able to spend up to 4 purple power in a turn without actually having to recycle means that your future turns just have so many more options available to you. Game 2 is the double obelisk game. My opponent is on the play. They end up playing their Draven turn 1, I believe, and we end up just slogging for a little bit, but eventually my opponent develops a board of like Nocturne, Noxus, Rasa, Fizz, Ez, or something like that, and I ended up just conceding to save time. In theory, I could have taken the time to break the board, but I was far enough behind at that point that I figured I was better served trying to actually win game 3 while I'm on the play with my Zon Warrens. And then game 3 happens. We both take one of our miracle turns. My miracle turn was delayed because I had I believe it was a double trove, double detonate draw. So I did that to just have more resources to start my actual miracle turn with. My opponent took their miracle turn. I started mine. I took mine. And I end up hiding a card on one battlefield. It's like there's an Ezreal with a shovel on, or no, it was just an Ezreal, and I hit a fight or flight in order to try to protect the Ezreal from a Glorious Executioner trigger. And my opponent leads by casting a Calm Shot. I respond, I flip up my hidden card, pull the Ezreal back. My opponent just goes, that's a treasure trove. It's like, fuck. So we end up having a judge come over, assess the situation. There are no other hidden cards in my hand, just this one fight or flight. We end up having a judge. The floor judge ends up ruling that this is a game loss and tells me I'm allowed to appeal. I appeal. We go through the appeal process, and the floor judge does a little bit of investigating, upholds the ruling. It sucks. I ended up hiding the treasure trove because in my hand, the trove and the fight or flight looked very similar. 2-cost purple cards, blue swirly backgrounds, trying to play very quickly to try and actually finish the game. It was unfortunate because the game was actually shaping up to be very interesting. My opponent had a very wide battlefield, but my miracle turn was very, very powerful as long as I have the time to convert my cards in hand into points. I think I'm ahead, but we ended up not finishing the game due to, one, we ended up spending a lot of time with the judge call and appeal, and frankly, I kind of wanted to get my head back on straight after that. But Nova, A+ individual, if you're watching, no hard feelings about this, even though I've said it a million times. I'm going to just keep saying it. No hard feelings about it. And as we end up seeing later on in this tournament, I end up converting in spite of this really hard to swallow game loss. So definitely a learning moment though, and I really hope policy around hiding a card you can't changes. Round 4, I ended up playing into another mid-range Draven matchup. This was a rematch from round 7 of the first tournament. My opponent and I both knew exactly what the other was doing. Neither of us made any changes to our deck lists. Game 1, I just got ran the hell over. Just a combination of not really drawing units to contest the board. My engine just didn't really come online, and my opponent had a very, very aggressive start, and I think a Ride the Wind was even involved here. But the other two games just did miracle stuff and just managed to grind them out. Round 5 was yet another mid-range driven matchup, which I believe makes this my 4th or 5th one on the weekend. And it played out very similarly to the last round. Game 1, I just never really got my engine going. I lost the die roll. My opponent had a very aggressive start, and my curve was skip turn 1, turn 2, play my Draven. He gets falling start immediately. Turn 3, just play a ram, do nothing else after having bottomed double ram. Just never really got my engines cooking, and eventually just got aggroed out before I could actually start the engines properly. And then games 2 and 3, I managed to end up just get the engines running, and my opponent just could not deal with the raw card and power differential that the Miracle deck can generate when unimpeded. Round 6, I end up pairing into a Kaisa player. The Kaisa player is not safe to draw into the top 8 of the 5K, so we sit down and start playing. I end up losing game 1. Again, a very similar situation to the last couple of rounds, where I full mulligan, can't really get my engine started, and just kind of get removal spelled out of the game. I don't know if I'm mulliganing incorrectly, or if it's just a matter of Kaisa has Falling Star and Singularity, whereas my engine mostly relies on assembling A plus B combos. But I don't really remember a ton of specifics from this game, other than I end up getting punked out by a Time Warp, I believe, which ended up just not really. I mean, you die to their one Time Warp if they draw it, but you can't really ever play around their one Time Warp. And then game 2, I end up having another shovel game. This shovel just represented a bunch of dummies, and they ended up just beating my opponent to death. Game 3, I end up playing this game very, very, very badly. Just not caffeinated enough. Ended up pitching like a merchant to an Ezreal instead of a scrap heap that was in my hand at one point. End up having to play scrap, play another scrap at the end of the game, and then that second scrap got me into the Doomsday pile that I built a couple turns prior, which did end up letting me break their Thousand Tail Watcher and eventually convert that value into winning the game. But to be perfectly frank, I did not deserve to win that game for how badly I played it, and I took a few minutes, got some more water, got a little more caffeine, took some ibuprofen, and just made sure I was primed and ready to go for being number 1 seed in the top 8. And so, going into the top 8 and being the number 1 seed, I am guaranteed the play, assuming I want it, which does actually create some more interesting things with the Obelisk subgame. knowing that your opponent has the play, you can use it to get your obelisk game out of the way if you want to, which could end up letting you play more strong games as opposed to having to use your obelisk on a weak game. But that's not something that my opponent chose to do in this case. My opponent chose to lead on Reaver's Row, and we just went and we just played a match like normal. I started off on the play, and don't really remember a whole lot about this specific game. I managed to write down my opponent's interaction suite for game one, since this was an open deck list top 8. Their interaction in game one was 1 bargain, 1 ride the wind, and 1 switcheroo, alongside the typical 3 fighter flights, 2 falling stars, and 2 read my own handwriting, 2 rebukes, it looks like. And it looks like I in this game, since we were untimed, I took some more detailed notes about what I was recycling. But this game was another game against Midrange Draven that was defined by the shovel. The shovel, once again, being the MVP. I cannot stress enough how important Last Right is in any of these grindy matchups. Just getting more bodies out of 1 card, very, very good in any matchup where you're not actually going infinite with virus cycles. And then game 2, I ended up recycling low pretty aggressively, which ended up costing me a lot of points. I remember I ended up spending, it was like 2 stack decks, 2 detonate troves, and 2 called shots before I saw my first seal, which meant I'd rolled down on runes a lot before I started being able to actually generate additional power through my seal. So I ended up having to play this game where I was fighter flighting just to stop my opponent from getting points, just to be able to just to try to like build power back up with the seal. And then eventually ended up having a turn where I used seal for called shot. Ended up setting up a hand that was Vi, double bushwhack, and hard bargain on exactly 8 runes on the turn that I am at 6 and my opponent is holding both battlefields. I end up sending like 15 might of, or not 15, but like somewhere in that range of just Ross's and battering rams, conquered the left battlefield. I believe it was my obelisk. And then after that, I play 1 bushwhack, go down to 6 runes up. And my opponent has 6 runes available as well. They repeat a hard bargain at me. I let the first bushwhack go, play a second bushwhack, and he just goes, yep. I play a Vi, build a pile that was like, I don't know, 20 some cards or something, just make this Vi infinite, and just send it into the other battlefield that has a Ferris Forerunner at it. And if this line doesn't work, then I lose the game. and we do have to play game 3. However, my opponent taps out to try and rebuke this Vi, and I have exactly enough resources left to hard bargain the rebuke, which ends up winning me the game. So just knowing how to sequence the double bushwhack, like I said in the deck tech, the double bushwhack letting you bushwhack through a piece of interaction, very, very important in some of these games. And that was the last, my match was the last match of the top 8. And after this, the 4 players remaining in the tournament decided to split the prizing since there was no difference in series points or between first and fourth, and only first and second would actually gain money if a split was denied. So we all agreed to split, and based on the after Swiss standings, I still am in first place, so I am declared the victor of this tournament. No trophy to play for, but my car had a 4.5-hour ride to get from Houston back to the DFW airport, and I am making this video to commemorate this win and just talk about this deck. So just a few closing thoughts on the deck and where we go from here. And obviously there is the impending set 3 and rules update and potential bans coming out of the Riot headquarters as well. From what I've seen thus far, I'm recording on March 18th at 1 in the afternoon Central Time. I haven't seen anything that stops this deck really been spoiled yet, and I also don't really see anything that makes this deck stronger. The only change I would make for set 3 would be change the hard bargain out for abandon. Abandon is the new remand, which would just counter any spell, put it back in its controller's hand. And it also predict, or is it vision? Whichever it is, it scries 1. Hard bargain, if your opponent knows about it, fairly easy to play around. There are times where you do have to play a hard bargain. However, I think in this case, just being able to remand your opponent's big spell or use it to protect your own called shot from a defy, I think is much stronger than the ability to counter the spell wholesale unless they pay 4. Given that you receive 2 resources every turn, it is a lot harder to make a counter unless you pay 2 convert, unless your opponent taps all the way out for something. I think this deck is very much too good, in spite of having the ability to lose games to itself, in spite of the fact that there are things that are good against it, namely Sneaky Deckhand is extremely good against this deck. Being able to compress games by just having 3 resources score 2 points effectively, being able to compress games like that, very, very, very powerful. And I think this might lead to an uptick in Irelia. This might see traditional Vi, Ride the Wind, Annie decks come back, since that deck also got to play Sneaky particularly effectively. We've already seen mid-range Draven start to adopt sneaky deckhand for their obelisk on the play games. And I think sneaky is just a very, very underplayed card at the moment. If sneaky deckhand becomes more popular, we could perhaps cut one of our 2 battlefields that are not particularly powerful for an aspirant's climb. This aspirant's climb lets us basically just negates half of a sneaky deckhand, which should convert into, on average, a half a turn or so, which would let us, which would basically give us more ability to just get our engine online and play the game. But giving up obelisk means you don't have turn 1 Draven games unless your opponent gives you an obelisk game. Giving up Veiled Temple. The Veiled Temple game, representing moving your shovels around or just representing extra power, is something I'm hard pressed to give up. And Zon Warrens, given that we are a triple scrap heap deck, is non-negotiable. We must have Zon Warrens, especially in the games post-board against Draven, where we're cutting our traveling merchants because they just don't interact in combat well, and we don't want to be giving them cards. So that's one adaptation we can make. I wasn't particularly impressed with Brynhir Thundersong. I only played against Irelia once and didn't really draw it against Irelia, which is where the card would shine. In theory, the card is powerful against mid-range Draven as well. However, I care more about just having a hard bargain in that matchup, I think. Which the Brynhir Thundersong could be another hard bargain, could be another abandon, but there are games where you do want access to the silence. Pack of Wonders, uncuttable, very much a part of your post-board plan against blue decks. You just need the ability to play this Treasure Trove Pack of Wonders grind game against a lot of decks. 7/5 Rune Split felt very good. 1 Vi, 1 Shovel was the right split. Spinning Axe, 1 combat on its own a lot of times. I think this deck is very well put together. Team Detonate did an excellent job with building this deck and piloting it. And I don't necessarily know what I would change besides that Brynhir Thundersong slot and also upgrading hard bargain into abandon. However, all of that is probably going to be moot given the fact that there are bans coming, and I do not expect Called Shot to be long for this world. I don't think this card is sustainable, both from a card advantage perspective as well as a round clock perspective. I've heard a lot of, this deck is just a who's who of cards that people have mulled about and wanted banned. There's Falling Star. Falling Star was enemy number 1 in set 1, mostly due to the fact that Kaisa would bail out the power cost and only have to recycle 1 for this while killing 2 units. But it was a very, very aggravating card to play against in set 1. People have talked about banning Scrap Heap, the interaction with Zon Warrens, with Ezreal, with Traveling Merchant, things that can't really be ignored. People have talked about banning Detonate. Detonate paired with Trove is a very powerful engine.
I could humor that. People have also talked about banning Ezreal. Ezreal just being cost reduction and card selection on the same card, very, very powerful. People have also talked about banning Vi or errataing Vi to only be once per turn, recycle X, give me X. I do think the Vi errata is kind of a nuclear option, given both that one, there are some variants of Miracle that do not even play Vi. They are just going through their deck once and hoping that that is good enough, which it usually is. But also, errata, a functional errata on cards, I don't think is a particularly healthy precedent to set, despite the fact that Vi, one, you are actually obligated to choose the order. You cannot just randomize the order. You are obligated to choose an order for the cards that you put onto the bottom of your deck, but also just the, okay, I have these 11 cards that go on the bottom of my deck. I have to make sure they're in the right order so that I do actually draw them in the right order. I think Vi is bad for the long-term health of the game, because I think given that deck sizes, they can't really print powerful cantrips at all anymore. Like, I don't think they could ever print something on the level of Called Shot ever again. Otherwise, Vi will just be a problem again. But I'm not a game designer. I do not envy those that are making the decision on what to ban out of this deck. However, I can just say I do not think this deck can exist as it is long term in a healthy game of Riftbound. And that is all I really have to say. I am going to keep playing this for as long as Riot lets me. This very much plays to my strengths of just cycling through my whole deck, knowing what cards I need when, making these micro decisions on cantrips, knowing what is available to me, how far down things are. This is all stuff that as a primarily legacy Magic player, I am very interested in doing. And if you happen to like Storm in Magic, Miracle Rogue in Hearthstone, or Diamond Dude Turbo from Yu-Gi-Oh, or anything in that same range of decks, you should give this a shot if you happen to already have access to these cards. I would not recommend purchasing Seal of Discord, for instance, if you do not already have them. These things being $100 a piece, definitely not something I would just go out and buy. But if you already have these seals, give this deck a shot. It is a blast. And that is all I have. See you.